place stayed. They left. They ran out. Well, my brother-in-law and sister live in North Carolina, and they've been there the whole time. But his parents moved to North Carolina Yeah, yeah, they still have a place there. They rent out the house that they had. They do some construction stuff, obviously. And then they go down quite a bit and visit them.
Yeah.
They miss it.
So I'm originally from South Florida.
Okay.
So I like getting out there as much as I can.
Right.
It's my favorite city.
Oh, it's nice.
Between, for a week in February, it's the coolest place in the world.
Are you going? Did you go down? Are you going down?
I'm not going down
Oh,
this
not
year.
this year.
No. So we'll see. Hopefully next year.
Future years. Future years.
Let me know if I can get you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh.
Hello.
Katie.
If we happen to get a good question or something, we'll write it on a piece of paper and pass it up to you if we think it's a good question.
That's
or do you
great.
think that's a bad
Well,
idea?
no, I think that's great. I usually,
Batteries out every time you turn it off.
like, I can usually see.
Really?
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Maybe.
Hey, if you're all over it, okay, great.
But if I miss something, don't hesitate to give me something. If you see, if you're like, how come she hasn't asked that question? It may be that I just didn't see it. But yeah.
Okay,
I,
cool.
I'm trying to think.
Well,
Last
if you're
week.
monitoring it, then I think you'll be all right.
Is that a surprise?
Usually I am. I'm going to pull up this guy. Let's see.
Want to stand up and tell Congress what to
Thank
do.
you.
I mean, they're making the point of the bill. That you got too much power.
It's 114, right?
Somebody from Daily
Oh,
Signal
tweeted it?
At the retreat, it was kind of funny. I don't know if you were at the table, Mulvaney, but
Thank you.
Chairman Lucas, former Chairman Lucas, was complaining about how high his assessment was.
Oh, okay, you were at the same table I was.
Yeah, he was like, I thought it'd go down a lot from chairman, but oh my gosh. Financial services, he was just whining and complaining about all the money he had to raise. He said, well, I'll let you know. Mine gets raised first and blah, blah, blah. Lucas? I like hearing those doubts. It's good to hear those doubts. Assuming they're accurate.
Yes,
What I
well,
heard
his
from him
comment,
was,
but
yeah.
wasn't that the comment of Boehner that once we implement this, it'll never be implemented? It's promised to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not the job guy.
Hey,
The other thing Frank told me, he said, I really got a blank chewing over his vote for the speaker. I said, from whom? He said, from my wife.
We know how tricky
I
it is.
says, where's your wife live, Frank? Back in Oklahoma. I said, well, there you go. Yep. That was
That's
fascinating.
why their whole problem with this Homeland Security bill is 6 weeks ago. It's all supposed to be secure. That's why they can't pull it out.
Jeffrey.
If there's over
here, sir.
so
Buenos dias.
call it.
See?
They're in trouble. He did a good job last night. I was watching you yesterday. It was just a rerun. I was watching you.
It's usually a very good mix. So. 50 Shades of Terrorism.
Well, I'm going to start off.
I thought it was
Where do you come up with shit?
If Obama would have said it, his swag and all, it would have been so, oh, that's so cool. I say it and it's some 40th slip.
What'd you say?
Shades of
You know,
Terror.
I hear from the intel community, Al Qaeda.
Good to meet you.
Regional security threat. Al Qaeda is global. And so I asked the guy with NCT, National Counterterrorism, I said, look, is Al Qaeda still out? He said, absolutely. I said, so we got ISIS, we got Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al Qaeda in Middle East and North Africa, Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf, all these other terrorist organizations. So I'm not going to get into the 50 Shades of Terrorism, but
I think that's the greatest line. Oh, how are you?
duck, and he makes us look.
Immediately, Wall Street Journal
Amateurs.
tweets it out.
Oh, really?
CNN picks it up. They create a vine of eagle, and it goes over and over 50 shades of terrorism. 50
Really?
Who did that? CNN did.
Where in North Carolina are you from?
Greensboro with
Oh, okay.
triads.
My sister and husband and her husband they live in the Wake Forest area outside of Raleigh. So. Okay. Yep. And moved it. Well, because he teaches at Southeastern, which is on the old Wake Forest campus.
Okay.
So.
Southern Baptist pastor for the last 15 years.
Oh, really?
Worked at Calvary Baptist with Dr. Leadership for many years.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Well, they've really enjoyed it.
Genevieve, right?
Genevieve, I think. Nice to meet you.
Scott, how are you? Good to see you here. Thanks for coming.
Our privilege.
How are you?
Don't say that.
Make you look sane, Scott. Well, I mean, you take away the votes, you're probably a conservative.
Can I get a nugget or something? Maybe I have time for that.
Yeah, you want some?
I want to get some.
Yeah.
If you want to start.
How can you eat this when you've got the House Liberty Caucus lunches?
That's why I only have 4. That's why I only have 4.
This is my breakfast.
Yeah.
Eat
Plain breakfast. What's the definition of breakfast now, Tim?
I
Does it
remember.
go moo moo, cluck cluck, and oink oink all at the same breakfast table? It ain't breakfast.
I remember a story years ago, back when we first started, where you were making breakfast up in your cage.
Yes,
And you, I don't know if you still do that. I
once
didn't
in a while
believe
I
it
do.
was true because you've never invited, I think, me or.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the February, it is February, right? Edition of Conversations with Conservatives, and this is a monthly event that we do, sponsored by the Daily Signal and the members you see up here on the dais. It's chaired by Congressman Raúl Labrador, Congressman Tim Huelskamp, and Congressman Jim Jordan. They're here every month. Well, usually Jim Jordan is here every month. Hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. And then they invite other members of Congress to come in and be a part of the conversation. And so your questions are for them and for all those here. We want to invite anybody who would like to watch us remotely, and for those who are, welcome. You can watch it live. We're streaming it on dailysignal.com/live. You can also join the conversations via Twitter. So if you want to send in questions, just send them to @conversations, and you can use the hashtag CWC114. Well, I'm going to get us started off this morning, gentlemen, with a question on an activity that happened a little bit earlier this week, dealing with immigration, and Senator Majority Leader McConnell sending the House DHS funding bill, saying we can't get it done in the Senate. We're going to toss it back to the House and ask you to take another look at it, make some changes. What's your reaction to that move, and what should happen next?
You know, Mitch McConnell can't change the rules of the Senate. And this is important enough for Mitch McConnell to change the rules of the Senate. We've had the Democrats do the nuclear option for low-level appointments, for a bunch of other things. We're talking about a constitutional crisis right now, where we're allowing the President of the United States to go outside of the Constitution and he decide that he's going to make the loss of the land, which is one of the most outrageous things that a president can do, and we're having senators tell us, well, we don't have 60 votes. Well, why don't they just all go home? If they don't want to fight, if they don't want to work, if they don't want to do the hard work that is necessary to do the will of the American people, then maybe they just need to pack up and they need to decide that for the next 2 years, we're not going to do anything in the Senate. Because if we're going to allow 7 Democratic senators to decide what the agenda is of the House Republican Conference, of the Senate Republican majority, then we might as well just give them the chairmanships, give them the leadership of the Senate, and allow them to decide what the focus and the agenda for the American people is going to be for the next 2 years. So that's what I have to say to the
I think
Senate.
the broader issue here, though, regardless of how you feel about immigration, and our opinions vary even on this dais probably about how the nation ought to handle immigration. We're at a pivotal time in American history in that do we allow the executive branch to step over that constitutional separation of powers and actually legislate and create law, which he did, I believe, in this. And so that really needs to be what's talked about in pushing the Senate. Do you agree with capitulating here to the president and the executive branch and weakening your constitutional role as a member of the legislative branch, which is the Senate? So I think we've got to talk about it in those terms. This isn't about amnesty at this point. This isn't about immigration. It's a broader issue of executive overreach and the trampling of the United States Constitution. That's why it's so important, and that's the message that the senators need to get, regardless of how they feel about immigration. It's about their rightful place in the role of government.
And Representative Duncan is exactly right. If you saw, I didn't mention immigration once in my answer, because this is not about immigration. This is about the proper role of Congress and the proper role of the president. And the president has exceeded his authority. I find it amazing that you have the press here is going apoplectic about John Boehner inviting the leader of Israel to come speak to us because he didn't consult with Congress. I mean, he didn't consult with the president. But they haven't once gone apoplectic about the President of the United States going outside of the Constitution and making his own laws.
Agreed.
I think it's hypocritical.
Well, this is not a controversial issue. Even by the President's own volition over the last 2 or 3 years, I think more than 20 times, he has said at different places in different settings, this is outside of his scope of authority. It's outside his boundaries. It's a violation. And yet he would come back at this point and try to insist or attempt with these illegal executive actions. That's the problem, and I think and would certainly strongly encourage that the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hold the line on this. We need pushback. The House has done its job.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, go.
Two additional thoughts on that. One, I don't think Mitch McConnell should let the Senate rules trump the Constitution. Yeah, that's the issue here. The second point I'd like to make, when Mitch McConnell and others in the Republican leadership on both sides decided to proceed down this road in December, it's no surprise where this would end up. They knew then they didn't have 60 votes, and so they have to look at the option that my colleague Raúl has suggested.
And sorry, I have a lot to say about this today, but it's amazing. If you think about when they came up with this strategy, they knew they had 54 votes. It wasn't House conservatives who came up with this strategy. In fact, if you look at the record, we voted against the Cromnibus. Some of us even voted against the rule that was going to allow the Cromnibus to go to the floor because we thought that we needed to have a 2 or 3 month CR so we could have time to negotiate with Senate Republicans on what the best strategy was going to be. It was our leadership that decided this strategy, and they did it in consultation with Mitch McConnell. What Mitch McConnell needs to do is he needs to tell the Senate this week that they're going to stay here for next week. Forget about recess. And they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that this gets to the floor. Imagine what the American people will think about our party and the Republican Party if we stay here for a week, we decide not to go on recess, and we actually fight for the principles that the American people sent us here to fight for.
Yes.
And there's something short of, and I don't like the words nuclear option. I always thought that was a little strange. But the rule is not constitutional. The rule is by tradition, right? And the rule that is in place now has not been sacrosanct since the beginning. The rule has been changed from time to time. There is something you could do short of changing the 60 votes to a different number, and that's simply make them talk. I mean, do the old Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. If you really are passionately motivated by something, get up and work instead of just putting your name on a bill or signing a piece of paper. Get up and go to the floor for 18 hours and speak on an issue. The rule is the way that it is as an accommodation by the senators for the senators so they don't actually have to work. You could leave the 60 vote rule in place, but make them actually get up and speak. They don't do enough, I think, to move legislation forward, and I think it's important to remember that this rule is not in the Constitution. It is a creature of the Senate, and they could change it anytime they wanted to.
All right, we're going to open up to the floor, and I just ask everybody, when I call on you, just to please state your name and your affiliation. We'll start here on the front. And yes, please wait for the mic. Thank you.
Hi, Kelsey Harkness with the Daily Signal. Do you agree with Senator Cruz that Senate Republicans should threaten to block Obama administration nominees like Loretta Lynch to get the DHS funding bill through? And if not, what realistic actions do you think that Senate Republicans can take?
Everything should be on the table.
Plus, you've got Loretta Lynch who said that she approved of the president's actions. How can you approve of the candidate for the highest law enforcement officer in the nation who's not willing to enforce the laws? So I think there's a bunch of different reasons to hold up that appointment.
I would agree. I did. Ran into a senator this morning. He was busy packing his bags, put them in the vehicle because they were planning to leave town tonight. I don't know if that has changed, but I agree with my colleague here. Leaving town tonight when you've haven't required them to do the work to hold up a bill, and I think it's time for them to stay a little bit longer.
Next question. Yes, ma'am. She's right.
From the New York Times. This is to everyone. I'm curious if you think you could support the AUMF that the president sent over, and also what you think about the ability for the president to put troops on the ground.
Go ahead. I've already spoken. I'm happy.
I want to read it. Want to look at it. And we're going to have. I think the speaker said we're going to have hearings and debate, and I think all that's important. So. Look, when you're looking at something of this gravity and this important in dealing with a threat that is as evil as what we have out there, I think it's important we get it right. So that's the approach and the tack that I'm going to take.
I'm a no, and the first reason is that you have to define your enemy before you can defeat your enemy, and this president and this administration fails every time in identifying the enemy in that regards. And so until we can actually define that, I'm not willing to put any type of men and women in harm's way with a president who's got a feckless idea of what it takes to defeat this enemy.
I thought he did define the enemy. It's the Crusaders. Sorry. For me, it's a pretty high threshold. I need to know that we have a national security. We have an existential threat to the United States first. And I haven't been convinced of that. I know, these are terrible people. These are terrorists. They're doing horrible acts. But I need to know first that it's an existential threat. And if it is, then I want to go in to destroy them, not to play footsies with them and not to do something short term. So if we are going to go to war, because that's what an AUMF is, it's a declaration of war. If we're going to go to war, then we need to go in to win, to destroy, to do it as quickly as possible, and to get the hell out as soon as possible. And I don't think any of the president's statements or even his AUMF draft deal with those issues.
Yeah, I would just say that I don't believe that the language in the AUMF sent by the White House is what we're going to vote on, assuming we vote on anything. I think it will be changed by the House. I've got some concerns. I think this actually limits the president's ability that he currently has under the existing AUMF. I think it leaves it wide open from a geographical standpoint. There's no geographical parameters in that I'd love to see. And then a broader question I think Raúl brought up is I'm not really high on the AUMFs anyway. I think Congress has a constitutional role to declare war or not declare war, and we are operating under War Powers Resolution and Act and AUMFs. I just, from a constitutional standpoint, which I think conservatives really, lean on the Constitution, I think we need to have that debate as well. So I'll leave it at that.
In my case, I'm tired of the bad wars, and I'm tired of all the dying. And I just think that too many of our brave young men and women get killed and hurt in faraway places where our neighbors and our allies in that part of the world don't do their fair share of work, and where the enemy is undefined and the goal and the outcome that we're shooting for is also undefined. I don't want us to get into another war with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. We know what that ending will be, and it's not right for our folks. It's not right for the people dying, don't know why they're dying, and it's just not right for for all of us. So I would have to see, I have concerns about this. I'll wait until the final bill comes through, but I would have to see a big coalition with big effort from other people so that we don't have to bear more than what we should have to bear to take on this enemy. Having said that, this enemy needs to be taken on, and we can't just act like they're not there. So, but we have to, in my view, go big so that we can take care of this threat for future generations, but we shouldn't be the ones carrying the whole load, which leads to too much unnecessary dying, in my view.
Let me just add some last final thoughts, and that is, I want to, any AUMF, if that's what the House and Senate vote on, I want to give the military commanders the ability to use their expertise and knowledge, give them the flexibility and the rules of engagement to actually let them defeat the enemy. And I don't want to see us continue to micromanage war from Washington, D.C. That's failed policy. It failed us in Vietnam. It's failed us so far in Iraq and Afghanistan. We should not micromanage battlefield from D.C. I yield back.
Ashley, I'm not the biggest interventionist in the world. I'm not an isolationist, but I'm also not a neoconservative. I've read the AUMF. I think we will have the debate. I think we'll have a in committee and on that we do. If I don't think anybody's decided yet on whether or not they would vote on this. I think Jeff is also right. We may end up voting on something separate than this, but I think that everybody up here will be given the opportunity to offer their amendments and to have debate on the topic, which is a move in the right direction.
At the Wall Street Journal, if Senator McConnell doesn't agree to change the filibuster threshold, would you view a funding lapse? Would you think that Democrats would take the blame for that? Would you think the funding lapse would be preferable to a short-term extension of current funding for DHS?
Well, the obstruction is coming from the Democrats. The Senate Democrats are, when you think about this, they're not even allowing a debate amendments to occur on the bill. They're saying that we went too far in the House. And they have every right to believe that. We're the two different parties, two different houses, but allow the debate to happen. All they need is 7 Democrats to allow the bill to go to the floor and open it for amendments. The Senate Republican leadership has already said that they will give the Democrats every chance they want to amend the bill. They can take some of the things out of our bill that we sent over there, but they're not even allowing this debate to happen. So the obstruction is that they're the ones who decided not to allow the American. That's the way the story should be written.
Chris, that's all that needs to happen, and then we can have a debate. They can send back. We can go to conference, and it all works the way it's supposed to work. So that's the problem, and that's what we hope, as my friend said, we hope you'll write about that and say, Mr. Manchin and Mr. Donnelly and everyone else over there, do what you told the voters you were going to do in November. And they might actually be shocked that some politicians keep their word around here.
And face it, I mean, and this is not being highly reported or even highly discussed, the Senate Democrats want the shutdown. Because in the government shutdown, the amnesty goes forward. The only way to stop the amnesty is to pass something that specifically prevents the president's already.
People are tired. They told Obamacare, and they were going to fight the president's unconstitutional actions. It's pretty simple. When you fight for, we just won the largest majority in the House that we've had since the 1920s, and we just took over the Senate Republican, the Senate majority. So that we have a lot to show for it to do.
You know, explain to me what the bad problem is here. It's a series of bad behaviors by this president, and it's up for 3 years past for all those people that are here, and then allowing those children that were here now to be anchors. I can guarantee you, and when the American people who realize they're not really being protected under the current law occurs, the
1987, George Washington was a very popular person, and and we've got the largest majority now. We reflect the will of the people on this. And as Raúl said, it was two really main issues, Obamacare and executive overreach. This is, like I go back to what I said earlier, it's a pivotal time when it comes to that. And I think that's what the story is. This is about the Constitution, but this is of that separation of power. That's why it's so important.
Come back to your question, though, because I think your question was, or at least implied in your question, is why don't we work with the Senate ahead of time to see what we can pass that they could pass? Didn't we do that on this? This is the that question, but the answer is that's what we're doing now, and this is what it's gotten us.
And that's such a great point. We were told in December that this is what Mitch McConnell wanted. He did not want the 3-month extension that we as conservatives were asking for. He wanted to do the Cromnibus. So now that we gave him what he...
I think that this is worth fighting for because we all know people that are under permanently dropped, or we just legalize a whole new set of competitors into the labor force, that those folks ought to be taken into account. And those are stakeholders that also matter. And that executive decrees that ignore large parts of people that are impacted by that decree is unfair, and it makes their life more difficult. And so I understand my colleagues that are in this fight on constitutional grounds, but I think of my friends and family members that would like a better job or a job, and I think their life just got more difficult. And I don't think we let leadership off the hook for that.
Front row, and then we'll come to you in the thing.
I'm Susan Cornwell with Reuters. One or two Republicans in the Senate now are saying that perhaps you should split this. Mark Kirk was saying yesterday, I think we should just bring up a clean DHS bill and deal with the immigration issue.
How he was going to deal with the immigration issue separately, then he has no credibility until he can come up with a plan that, if he came up with a plan, I'm open to any ideas. If any senator has a better idea on how to deal with this immigration plan, I think all of us would be willing to listen. But that's the problem here in Washington, D.C. The strategy is always, let's wait till the next fight. And, you know, you guys in the media always say that we disagree about tactics. That's so wrong. We disagree about strategy, because there's never a Republican strategy to win. There's always a Republican strategy to capitulate and to wait till the next day for the fight.
Hi, Elise Foley from Huffington Post. I was wondering, with this immigration lawsuit that Texas brought, there might be a ruling soon on an injunction. If there is an injunction and the judge doesn't allow the programs to go forward, is that something that would allow you to vote for a clean DHS funding bill?
I think there's some division amongst conservatives on this. I've talked with some other folks about this. I think it does. My objection to the DHS funding is I don't want to do anything that gives the president the ability to fund the executive amnesty. I want to take away his ability to do that. If a court issues an injunction then I think it would be appropriate for us to consider the possibility of funding appropriations during the pendency of the injunction.
I would have a different opinion because.
No, that's fine. Again, I know that a lot of guys do.
Where's the trust in that aspect? Trust is a series of promises kept. Tell me why I should trust as president and the attorney general to uphold the rule of law. Absolutely not. I want to make sure that there is no way that he can actually get around from A to Z in embracing what he's done. So just because a court signs off, I need to see the compassionate aspect that we have law enforcement to that.
I think it's a great opportunity for the Senate Democrats to actually allow our bill to move forward. There should be no concerns for them if the court's saying this is not going to be implemented. So that should be the question for Harry Reid and the Democrats that are obstructing the debate in the Senate. Say there's no reason to hold up the House bill and move forward with the debate. So excellent opportunity. I appreciate, I look forward to you trying to ask that question of them. Thank you.
It's a great question. I don't know what the answer is until I see what the actual judgment says. But as you can see, we're going to be that will bring think about. But until I see an actual order, I think it would be wrong of us to speculate on what exactly our actions would be.
I tell from the pattern of this president and the attorney general, they always file injunctions and file relief against a higher court. So that will never pass mustered with this president.
Hi, I'm Cindy Sain with the Voice of America. Would you think that it is worth a lapse in funding for the Department of Homeland Security? And if that happens, how serious do you think the impact would be?
Worth to defend the Constitution? Probably. I mean, is it an uncomfortable position to be in, to have to choose between border security and the Constitution? Absolutely, but that's the problem with this plan and has been the problem with the plan since the very beginning.
Can you ask the Senate Democrats why they're putting 5 million illegals ahead of the Constitution and the safety and security of the United States? Can you ask the president that?
And
that's really the question.
And more than that, Raúl, they're putting 5 million illegals ahead of the Americans that are out of work.
Correct.
Well, and what about all the
for those jobs?
What about all the convicted felons that were just turned loose? I mean, do we really have security under this administration and underneath this this president? I would think not. Coming from Arizona, we'll have a different say about that.
And not just the people that are being displaced, but think about the people that are trying to go through the legal process. There's evidence already that DACA put everyone who had paid the fees to go through the legal process, put them on the back burner so you could put the DACA children ahead of the line. Well, that was when you were only talking about 1 million people. Now he's going to do it with 5 million people. Think about all the people that are trying to process through the legal system, the ones who are trying to do it the right way. Is it fair to them? We're all here for legal. The president is doing, he's upending the legal immigration system. He's putting the people that are here illegally ahead of the people that are trying to do it the right way, and it's going to delay the process for those people that are trying to do it the right way because they don't have the resources. You need to understand that they don't pay fees. The people that are in this process, the illegals, they don't pay fees. There is no application fee for their applications. The people that are trying to do the legal way are paying thousands and thousands of dollars in fees. So the money that they're paying for their legal applications is going to be used to process the people that are not paying fees and are in the United States illegally.
On the unfairness issue, think about it. Is it fair to senior citizens that 5 million illegals are now going to get Social Security benefits? Is it fair to taxpayers that potentially 5 million illegals are now going to get tax refunds, as Mr. Mulvaney asked yesterday in government oversight, maybe up to 3 years of the earned income tax credit? Is it fair to legal immigrants that they're not going to have to wait longer, as Mr. Labrador just pointed out? And is it fair to citizens that potentially now non-citizens are going to be able to vote? Secretary of State Husted will be testifying on that later today. So all that fairness concern that Mr. Clausen brought up is part of this debate. And to say, oh, all that's fine and we're going to potentially jeopardize Homeland Security to do all that, that's the central question.
In our society, and they deserve
To your actual question, which was, which I think was, is it worth shutting down Department of Homeland Security over this? Well, it's not clear what the impact is because there are a lot of things that are supposedly funded anyway, regardless of whether there's a continuing resolution or not. So the impact may be smaller than we think. But to answer your question, I'm not sure that it's worth it, but we gave up our leverage in the Cromnibus in December, and that's why so many of us stood up. That's why we voted, a lot of us. We to shoot. It's Homeland Security. This is a conservative thing. And we said, we might not fund this if you don't do what we want. And I think we have no leverage there. Whether we do it or not, there's no leverage.
Christina Marcos with The Hill. In the event there is a funding lapse with DHS and there is a shutdown, do you think there would be electoral consequences for it, regardless of who is blamed? Or will this be like in 2013, where Republicans took a lot of heat for that shutdown, but a year later you still did very well at the ballot box?
I just believe that. And so, I'm just not that scared of sticking to principles and fulfilling campaign promises that we made back home, irrespective of what leadership tells us to do here. We will I think my friends and I will take that battle on.
I think that they pivot on, the expectations are up here with the American public, and the messenger.
It's the whole power. Talk to my folks back home. Do they turn loose in our neighborhoods? Not to pull.
What could you do in retaliation?
The voters, right? The president's. We understand what the math is. Fighting. I will.
About what you've been able to do so far.
I think we've done that we're willing to try and work with the president. People ask me back home, say, what's doing that as well? And if got news.
Well, if you look on the I wanted to say to a colleague, what's that? And then I figured it out. It said S1. It's the first time we had to Mick's point, that's something positive, certainly, that we've got a bill that went through both chambers and will go to the president. The difficult problem is, though, this president, as Mick said, is going to veto that legislating part.
Back row, go ahead.
Hi, this is Christy Eshelman with Generation Opportunity. I want to switch gears a little bit. According to Pew, 40% of individuals who leave prison will reoffend and be reincarcerated. So I was just wondering if in
I'm a big opponent of mandatory sentencing. I'm a big opponent of actually a lot of things in the federal system. A lot of these issues, we should be dealing with them at the state level. And I think it would be better for us to allow the state courts to deal with a lot of the issues that we deal with at the federal level. So I believe in reforming our justice system. I think we have too many people are incarcerated for low-level offenses, and I believe that it makes economic sense, but more importantly, it makes a difference for people who, especially a lot of young people who make stupid mistakes when they're young, and they continue to pay for those mistakes for the rest of their lives. So I think we need to reconsider what we're doing. We have some of the lowest offense rates right now in the United States. We have a really high level of incarceration, and I think we need to think about our future generations and what we're doing and how we're impacting and affecting young people's lives. So I'm a big proponent of changing our mandatory sentencing laws and reforming our justice system.
When I listened to the President's State of the Union speech, I tried really hard to find something that we could work with him on in the next 2 years. And he mentioned sentencing reform and criminal justice reform. And so I've also, I guess I beat you to the punch. I co-sponsored a bill with Bobby Scott too last week that is a little more comprehensive, I think, than the one you're going to introduce. Here's the problem with why people reoffend. I was in county government, and we had a county jail, and so I saw these people up front and personal, up close and personal. There's a stigma attached with them. Once they become felons and they spend more than a year in jail or prison, then it's almost impossible to get reemployed. If you've done something, you lose your driver's license, and for instance. And what I realize is there's nothing conservative about locking up twice as many people in this country than any as a rate per population than any other country in the world. What is conservative about that? I call it socialism with restrained mobility. You're paying for their color TV, their food, their health care. You pay for everything they need. All of their wants and needs are provided by the taxpayer, and in exchange, you restrain their mobility. That is, there's no never incarcerate for nonviolent offenders. You have to displace violent offenders. Judges, have to make a decision about, okay, are we going to release this person early who's committed a violent crime? So there's nothing conservative about over-incarcerating, and that's why I will co-sponsor your bill as well. I think we need to do something on this. This is really something we could send the president that he would sign.
Other questions? Follow up, go ahead. Go ahead. He's got the mic. Go ahead.
It seems likely, just based on what Democrats are saying now, that in 2016, during the elections, you'll be hearing campaign ads that say Republicans are intent on deporting people, et cetera, et cetera. Are you worried about how this will
Do that anyway? With reality, we could. Don't think that they'll have the basis. Ads that will run against you based upon a specific vote, you shouldn't be here. I still want somebody to point out to me, the member of the conference. We always talk in the conference about how we don't want to take hard votes. I want to find the member of Congress who ran for Congress under the theme.
Phone to call Congress.
And let's go back through the history of the Democratic Party. President Obama, when he was Senator of the United States, promised George W. Bush that he was going to help him with immigration reform. Instead, he went to the Senate floor and he voted for poison pill amendments that killed the Senate bipartisan immigration reform bill. Then he promised the American people, and specifically the Hispanic community, that the first thing he was going to do as president was that he was going to pass a comprehensive immigration bill. Instead, he passed Obamacare and decided and used all of his political capital on that. And then when we started passing bills here in the House that had the support of some Democrats that dealt with a step-by-step approach, he said every single time that he was going to veto those bills unless he got the Senate comprehensive immigration bill. This has always been about politics for this president. It's never been about the proper policy. If he wanted to do the right thing right now, he would rescind his actions from December. And I think there's enough of a Republican majority here, and not all of us agree on this, but I believe that there's a Republican majority right now in the House to pass a step-by-step immigration reform plan. We could do it, and we could do it right now if the president decided to rescind his actions from December, and he could show the American people that he's willing to work.
Forcing a conversation about fairness for all groups in our society is neither angry or intolerant. And I'm not worried about running on that. I think other people matter besides just who the president says matters.
Just to follow up quickly with Congressman Labrador, is there any potential for that step-by-step immigration reform process if the president does keep these actions in place?
It makes it much more difficult because he's already said he's not going to follow the law. The only way we as Republicans are going to engage in a step-by-step approach is if we have trust that this president is going to keep is going to follow the law. He's telling his administration, he's telling Border Patrol agents to stop enforcing the law. He's telling them to actually show people how they can apply for benefits. He's making them social workers and not law enforcement agents. And I think there's no way that we can trust that this president will do the right thing if he continues with these actions. If he backs off, maybe, just maybe, we can have a better conversation. I think you're the one who asked the question about the
in the Hispanic law. That's why they're here, is they want to.
At all about a clean DHS bill? We're sort of at a standstill, and I'm wondering if there are other options being presented that we don't know about.
Outside the Beltway and put pressure on come out against Obama's executive amnesty.
Knows who those senators are. They're actually more than that. There's 13 of them, and their lights are being lit up. And most of the senators aren't even answering their phones, which is kind of hypocritical that they're not listening to the American public. But people across this country are lighting them up with emails, phone calls, also calling people back in the districts from each of the senators to actually engage them. There's outside groups that are in concert with that. Numbers USA, there's a number of groups that are out there, Freedom Works, that are also and coalescing. Generation Opportunity did that extremely
a marketing strategy where we can have the outside groups that have said that they believe. Number 3, that's all she. The Senate Democrat of the security of the United